Cruelest disease you never heard of, but now that Bruce Willis has gone public with his diagnosis of frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, a lot more people know about it.
You know, to go into that diagnosis appointment, and instead of hearing that there is no hope, there is nothing that we can do, that they'll say, here is a treatment.
Imagine a man whose presence on screen once rallied millions behind every whispered yippee-ki-yay, whose swagger and defiance etched themselves into pop culture's bedrock. Picture Bruce Willis striding through infernos and firefights, a reluctant hero in acts of unrivaled bravery who never flinched at danger. Now contrast those explosive moments with an image far removed from adrenaline and spectacle. Bruce Willis, still as stone, trapped in a body that no longer obeys, a mind at war with its own cells. That stark juxtaposition frames our story, an epic life clipped short by a diagnosis so devastating that it redefines heroism itself. From the moment word began to permeate social media, speculation blossomed like wildfire, whispers of memory lapses, onset confusion, disappearing lines. Fans who once queued for midnight premieres found themselves grappling with an unsettling reality. The man who taught us to cheer in the face of chaos now wrestles daily with a far crueler opponent. Frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, is not just a disease. It is a thief that picks your brain clean star by star, erasing memories, speech, and ultimately the essence of self. It's the silent annihilation of yesterday's triumphs, leaving behind only flickering echoes of a life once lived in high definition. Yet Bruce's journey did not begin with this final battle. It unfolded over decades of refusal to surrender, to stammers as a boy, to the sneers of bullies, to Hollywood's gatekeepers who doubted his fast-talking charm. He carved his own path from Pennsylvania college stages to New York auditions, landing a break in a detective series that blossomed into a global craze. He leveraged his sharp wit, his unpolished charisma, and a relentless work ethic to scale heights few dared to dream. And when Die Hard exploded onto screens, John McClane became an archetype of an everyman who refused to stay down. Bruce's bare-knuckled resilience looked real because it was real. He had been sparring with demons long before the camera rolled. The trajectory of Bruce's life resembles a cinematic arc that Spielberg might envy: humble origins to meteoric rise, a love affair splashed across tabloid pages, and a string of blockbusters that defined an era. Off-screen, he balanced marriage and fatherhood, navigating the perils of celebrity heartache and high-profile divorce. Through it all, he kept moving forward, delivering films that raked in billions worldwide, proving time and again that no setback could derail his ambition. Fans devoured every twist and turn, forging emotional bonds that tethered them to his characters, each quip, each quirk, each defiant grunt reinforcing the myth of an indestructible spirit. But heroes are seldom invincible, and life's script often diverges from our greatest expectations. Private struggles piled up, grief at the loss of a beloved brother, guilt over time stolen by fame, the subtle ache of grief that resistance alone cannot silence. Bruce's trademark grit carried him through hard times, but it could not shield him from the relentless progression of neurological decline. What began with misfired lines and repeated cues became unignorable lapses in cognition. Friends reported seeing him pause mid-shoot, gaze gone distant, as if searching for a fragment of memory that had fled. The toughest roles suddenly felt like impassable mountains. When doctors wrapped their verdict in gentle words, it sounded like a line from a tragic script: aphasia, yes, but worse, FTD. There was no heroic elixir, no last-minute miracle. Treatments could only stall the inevitable. The man who once stood amidst explosions to rescue others now required rescue from his own crumbling mind. The cruelest irony lay in the fact that Bruce had always been defined by his unbreakable voice and sharp dialogue delivery. Now, he struggled to articulate even a single word without assistance. He who had spat lines faster than bullets could no longer rely on those same words to anchor his identity. We'll walk through Bruce Willis's odyssey from defiant stutterer to action icon, from loving husband to solitary struggler, charting every triumph and tribulation along the way. We'll peel back the layers of blockbuster tales to reveal the man behind the legend, exploring how early childhood insecurities forged a steel resolve that propelled him past every barrier. We'll follow the heartbreak of a beloved brother's death through the lonely corridors of grief that no red carpet could illuminate. And finally, we'll confront the heartbreak of FTD, a disease that refuses to kill swiftly, but instead erodes existence, one neuron at a time. But this story isn't simply about loss. It's about the meaning we forge when everything familiar fades. It's about the binding power of family love when words fail, when laughter becomes scarce, and tears speak volumes. It's about legacy, how fleeting box office records pale beside the lasting imprint of a life that inspired courage, levity, and tenacity. If you have ever stood in the spotlight of life's challenges, feeling your strength wane, this is your story too. For Bruce Willis's plight is universal. We all face battles we cannot choose, enemies brewed within our own flesh and bone. Stay with me as we trace every turn of Bruce Willis's remarkable adventure, from the North Jersey boy, whose tongue once betrayed him, to the rebel who taught us to roar back at danger, to the hero now learning to speak through silence. Each chapter of this narrative carries vital truths about facing mortality, about the fragility of the human mind, and about the undying flame of love that glows even when memory dims. I promise you raw honesty, vivid details, and moments of hope that defy despair. And when we reach the final act, I invite you not only to mourn, but to celebrate the indomitable spirit that has endured far beyond any screen. Imagine young Walter Bruce Willis, born on a chilly spring morning in 1955, inside a modest wooden home in West Germany, his first cries echoing against gray skies. David Willis, a young American soldier sunburned by conflict, stood at the window, unaware that his first child carried an invisible hardship. When the family relocated to New Jersey, Bruce's cries grew not into laughter, but rattled stammers and broken syllables. Words seized in his throat, as if caught in an unseen net. Every attempt to speak became a struggle, transforming innocent utterances into battlefield skirmishes within his own mouth. On playgrounds, other children mimicked his hesitant sounds, twisting Bucket into cruel nicknames. Buck, Buck, they'd chant, eyes gleaming with mockery. Shame burned in young Bruce's chest like a hot coal. He would dart behind houses, gripping a rubber ball, head cast downward, wanting nothing more than to be ordinary. At night he wept silently under his covers, wondering if God had forgotten to give him a steady tongue. Each day brought fresh humiliation, each sentence a reminder of his difference. His parents tried to soothe him, offering gentle encouragement, but the sharp sting of ridicule carved deep grooves in his heart. He grew determined to reclaim control. With every stuttered syllable, he hardened a resolve. He would master words on his own terms. His father taught him to work with his hands, to live by sweat. But for Bruce, salvation would come through performing. At home, he listened to radio dramas, mouthing every line into a mirror, practicing inflections, until his voice felt less like a betrayer and more like an ally. He faced therapy sessions and practiced tongue twisters, sometimes crying in frustration, sometimes laughing at small victories. By his early teens, Bruce's performance prowess caught attention beyond family living rooms. In high school, he joined the drama club, finding relief in characters that demanded bravery he felt he lacked. Standing under stage lights, microphone in hand, his stutter vanished. The audience heard Joseph Crumb's words, not the boy behind them. Applause became an addictive balm for his wounded confidence. Still, when the final bow concluded, isolation would creep back as he removed the stage persona and faced empty halls. Those moments of triumph taught him that identity could be molded, that he could rewrite his internal script through sheer practice. After high school, Bruce did not immediately pursue Hollywood dreams. He worked odd jobs: security guard at a power plant, bouncer in local bars, private detective staking out suspects. Each role sharpened his observational skills and fed his desire to inhabit different personas, but auditions kept calling. In college, he briefly studied drama, sinking into roles that demanded cunning and wit. He realized that acting offered a platform to transcend his physical limitations. Where his voice had failed, characters could speak through him. He felt a hunger ignite within, a hunger to prove that a boy labeled Buck could one day command the globe's attention. In 1977, Bruce hopped a train to New York City, with two words echoing in his mind: I have to try. Audition after audition, he found doors barred or roles dismissed. Casting directors noted his good looks and charisma, but questioned his speech history. "You stutter," they'd say. "How will you carry dialogue on screen?" Bruce kept showing up, wearing determination like armor. A casting call for a fast-talking detective on a pilot series led him into a room where Sybil Shepherd awaited. In that moment, Bruce traded insecurity for opportunity. The series, Moonlighting, gave him a platform to conquer every syllable. His rapid-fire exchanges with Shepherd crackled with chemistry. The stutter that haunted him as a child dissolved once Bruce slipped into character. Audiences were hooked by his charm and timing. Producers took notice, critics hailed him as a breakout star, and Hollywood gates swung open. He was no longer the boy hiding behind barrels, he was a leading man who could light up screens and control narratives. That taste of triumph reinforced a belief that talent and relentless practice could overcome any flaw. As his star ascended, Bruce transitioned seamlessly from witty detective plots to high-octane action sagas. Each role demanded physicality and presence, but none posed a greater challenge than the battle against his own inner critic. Off-screen, he poured adrenaline and focus into stunts and lines, pushing his body and mind to extremes. On-screen, he projected unshakable resolve, crafting characters who embodied courage. Yet behind the scenes, questions nagged: how long could one outrun the shadows of doubt? How many explosions could a man survive before the earth quaked beneath his feet? Those doubts would follow him toward the pinnacle of success. By the late 1980s, Bruce Willis had defied every expectation that his modest upbringing and early stutter could foreshadow. He stood on a dusty LA soundstage beneath towering cranes and day-glow lights, microphone boom hovering like a helicopter rotor overhead. Around him, cameras rolled and extras scrambled through set dressing, but his focus was absolute. He had just wrapped a scene where John McClane dangled hundreds of feet above an inferno, his heartbeat pounding through the headphones as if mirroring the jet turbine engines whirling overhead. When the director called cut, Bruce lowered himself from the harness with a grin that spoke volumes. This was his element. Die Hard wasn't just another job, it was a crucible that fused his childhood resilience with raw cinematic spectacle. Every brick-battered building and every alphanumeric radio code echoed back to moments when he'd toiled behind the scenes of local theater, fighting to master a tongue that once betrayed him. Die Hard exploded into theaters like a cinematic grenade. Viewers crammed into multiplexes, drawn by trailers that promised unrelenting action and the promise of one man against all odds. Bruce's McClane strode through chaos with a gleam in his eye, his every sardonic quip slicing through tension like a razor. Critics lauded his seamless blend of vulnerability and bravado, noting that he had brought the everyman back to action films. Box office tallies soared, studios lined his pockets with blockbuster paychecks, and merchandise flew off shelves. T-shirts emblazoned with Yippee-ki-yay, die-cast replicas of the Nakatomi Tower, and comic book spin-offs. Bruce had become a brand, a promise that if bullets flew, you'd see him dodge, retort, and ultimately save the day. Off-screen, his life mirrored Hollywood's glare. In 1987, at a premiere for a different film, he met Demi Moore, a luminous figure fresh from her own breakout roles. Their chemistry was instant, whispers of electric connection sparking in gossip columns within hours. Close friends recall Bruce leaning in by the velvet rope, voice low but earnest, promising a future she could scarcely imagine. A few months later, under neon casino lights in Las Vegas, they exchanged vows in a ceremony as spontaneous as it was symbolic of two bold stars blazing new trails. Headlines dubbed them Hollywood's golden couple, their every appearance dissected for clues, matching sunglasses, whispered embraces, synchronized waves. Marriage and fatherhood offered Bruce a different kind of role to inhabit. Away from strobe lights and green rooms, he traded his action hero armor for sweatpants and bedtime stories. The arrival of 3 daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah, reshaped his priorities. He attended school recitals, coached t-ball games, and built makeshift fortresses in living rooms, his hearty laugh filling spaces quieter than any studio stage. Friends say he embraced fatherhood with the same intensity he once reserved for fight sequences, his eyes softening whenever he spoke of bedtime rituals or the feel of tiny hands in his. yet balancing frivolity and fame proved complex. Between promos, he listened to his children's laughter on speakerphone, praying that distance would never erode the bonds he'd worked so hard to create. Throughout the 1990s, Bruce's career skyrocketed. Sequels, ensemble casts, gritty dramas, and occasional romantic comedies, he tackled every genre with dogged enthusiasm. Films like Pulp Fiction gave him an edgier palette to paint, while comedies such as The Fifth Element revealed his knack for playful charm. Directors clamored to work with him, drawn by his reputation for both professionalism and that indefinable spark he brought to every frame. Yet for all the lights, camera, and action, a personal storm churned beneath the gloss. The stresses of fame, tension in a high-profile marriage, and the looming shadow of time away from family often left him adrift. Late nights on soundstages traded for early mornings in study halls created invisible fissures that neither box office receipts nor tabloid praise could bridge. Then tragedy struck. In 2001, Bruce's younger brother Robert was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer at 42. Robert had been more than a sibling. He was a kindred spirit, the first person to imitate Bruce's childhood buck, stutter into affectionate laughter instead of scorn. Friends describe Robert as his brother's rock, a confidant on late-night drives, a supporter who never doubted that Bruce would one day conquer stardom. When the news arrived, Bruce was filming on location in Europe. He scrambled to restructure his schedule, but time, inexorable and indifferent, slipped through his grasp. By the time he returned stateside, Robert had lost his battle. At the funeral, Bruce stood beside his family, rigid in a tailored suit, his heart fracturing in silence. He delivered eulogies more powerful than any line he'd ever spoken on screen, raw, unguarded, utterly human. That loss ushered in a quieter era for Bruce. He retreated from the relentless spotlight, opting for smaller projects, occasional stage work, and long stretches at home. Conversations that once revolved around cash-in on sequels shifted to memories of backyard barbecues and late-night storytelling. He gave interviews that reflected deeper introspection, speaking candidly about grief, purpose, and the fragility of life. Hollywood watched, some perceiving a newfound maturity, others murmuring about a star past his prime. But Bruce refused to be defined by gossip. Where once he had sprinted through airport terminals and reversed cars off cliffs, he now moved deliberately, choosing quality over quantity, presence over pomp. In the years leading up to his diagnosis, Bruce layered roles with subtle parallels to his own life: a retired detective mentoring the next generation, a father caught between duty and devotion, a soldier haunted by memories he could not escape. These parts felt less like work, and more like echoes of his personal journey. Yet behind the unflinching eye of the camera, reports surfaced of dropped lines and puzzled looks. On-set anecdotes described an actor apologizing mid-take, whispering for cue cards in his coat pocket. When a stunt coordinator asked if he was okay, Bruce shrugged and laughed it off. Just one of those days. But beneath that deflection lay the first tremors of something more ominous. The first unmistakable signs were subtle. A fleeting hesitation, a glazed look, when someone asked him a simple question. On the outside, Bruce Willis stood on set like any other seasoned professional, his jaw set, gaze unwavering. Yet inside, his mind scrambled for words that once tumbled from his lips with effortless confidence. He would answer as best he could, then excuse himself backstage, heart pounding as the silence followed. Crew members exchanged nervous glances, whispers casting shadows over a legacy built on spontaneity and wit. Rumors began to circulate. Is Bruce losing it? Too old for this? Gone soft? They circulated beneath the din of equipment, growing louder at every catering break and between shots. When medical tests finally delivered their verdict, Bruce received it in a sterile hospital room whose walls seemed to absorb the gravity of the moment. The doctor spoke with the tact of a diplomat, but the bluntness of a soldier: aphasia, loss of speech ability, and early signs of cortical degeneration. He explained that a subset known as frontotemporal dementia would likely follow, eroding personality, empathy, and language. There is no cure, the physician added, voice gentle yet final. Bruce, who had stared down villains and disaster sequences, felt a reverence wash over him, a solemn acknowledgement that even heroes have vulnerabilities. He left the clinic into the biting wind, fists clenched not in fight but in frozen resignation. Determined not to surrender, Bruce returned to the studio, clutching scripts as if they were life rafts. He wore an earpiece fitted inside his collar, and during takes, an assistant whispered lines into his ear. The setup felt like both salvation and surrender, salvation through continued work, surrender in his reliance on external prompts. Some days he nailed every cue, delivering performances that fooled no one but sparked relief. Other days, the earpiece crackled, lines overlapped, and Bruce's brow furrowed in confusion. Directors filmed around him, crafting shots that minimized his dialogue. Producers calculated budgets based on his name alone, yet feared the gamble of unreliability. They spoke softly about ethics and loyalty, about profit and legacy, in conversations Bruce could no longer fully follow. As word of his struggles leaked, social media erupted with speculation and judgment. Memes circulated, juxtaposing McClane's heroics with lines of aborted dialogue. Critics penned think pieces. Was the legend past his prime? Should he step aside? Even the Golden Raspberry community seized the moment, nominating him in multiple worst performance categories, a mockery that cut deeper than any bullet. Bruce responded with characteristic stoicism, no public outburst, no press conference, just the faintest shrug captured on camera. Behind closed doors, however, he grappled with a cocktail of indignation and shame. His greatest fear was not death but the dark void where words once lived, now silent and uninhabited. Through it all, Bruce found his true anchor in family. His daughters visited sets, their smiles and laughter piercing the fog of doubt. Emma, his steadfast partner, held him during sleepless nights, tracing gentle circles on his palm as his mind faltered. They celebrated small victories, a correctly recited line, a shared memory resurfacing after weeks of darkness. Those moments shimmered with clarity, proof that beneath the unspoken haze lingered fragments of the man who had once owned every scene he stepped into. Love became their language when words failed, a legacy of devotion more powerful than any cinematic monologue. Public outpourings of support transformed social feeds into tributes, hashtags demanding kindness trended, and fans lit candles to honor a hero who had always fought for others. His retirement announcement in 2022 read like a final curtain call, a statement acknowledging the diagnosis and expressing gratitude for years of love. Millions shed tears and shared stories of how John McClane's grit once helped them face their own battles. That collective empathy offered Bruce a balm, proof that while disease can dismantle bodies, it cannot erase the mark left on the human spirit. His legacy now transcends film. He shows us that bravery takes many forms, and sometimes true courage unfolds in quiet, profound silence. Now Bruce Willis's days have taken on a rhythm shaped by gentle routines and small triumphs. Mornings begin with sunlight slipping through curtains, illuminating photographs of younger days. Bruce in full action hero mode, a stubbled grin brimming with fearless confidence. But today's heroics are measured in smaller victories, successfully recalling his wife's favorite coffee order, drawing a simple sketch of their family home, or reading a few lines of a children's book to his grandniece. Each act reminds him that identity is not solely defined by explosive payoffs or dramatic cliffhangers. It is also contained within moments of vulnerability and tenderness. Emma, his partner through these quiet years, orchestrates an environment of calm support. She greets him at the door with a warm embrace and a whispered reassurance. You are still you. Their conversations rely on patient pauses and loving gestures, a raised eyebrow in shared amusement, a gentle squeeze of his hand when words falter. When Bruce forgets a name or searches for a phrase, Emma quietly offers alternatives. Sometimes she hums an old tune he once performed on talk shows, coaxing fragments of melody into his mind. Those musical threads bind them together when language loosens its grip. Family visits remain the highlight of Bruce's week. His daughters, Rumor, Scout, and Tallulah, arrive with laughter and spirited chatter, their presence a reminder of life's brighter arcs. They bring photo albums to pore over, pointing out snapshots of birthdays, vacations, and movie sets. Bruce's eyes light up at each recollection, even if the specific details remain elusive. Together they weave a tapestry of memories too precious for dementia to dismantle entirely. At sunset they gather on the patio, sharing stories and watching fireflies spark against the darkening sky. That collective warmth becomes a shield against the encroaching fog. Friends from Hollywood still drop by, exchanging hugs and soft greetings that speak volumes. Former co-stars arrive bearing anecdotal gifts, a framed vintage poster from a shared film, a boot from a stunt used in a famous explosion, an old script scrawled with margin notes in Bruce's own hand. These tokens carry the resonance of shared struggles and success, anchoring Bruce in a community grateful for his impact. When the earpiece emerges on occasion tucked into his lap, it is not a symbol of defeat but a bridge between past and present, providing cues so he can relish brief returns to the conversation. Even amid physical decline, Bruce holds a spark of curiosity. He attends art exhibitions with Emma, absorbing colors and textures that stir emotions without words. He listens to jazz records, closing his eyes as saxophone riffs float through the room. Music taps into a reservoir of understanding beyond syntax, reminding him of days when his rhythm on screen was dictated by gut instinct rather than written lines. These sensory experiences reaffirm that the human spirit thrives on more than language alone. It thrives on feeling, connection, and the capacity to marvel at beauty. Yet FTD is a relentless adversary. On days when confusion overwhelms him, Bruce retreats inward, seeking refuge in silence. He stares through windows as rain patterns trace abstract maps on glass, his thoughts drifting like leaves on a stream. Emma remains by his side, offering comfort without words, simply being present, a steadfast witness to a man confronting a world that has grown unrecognizable. Those instances of quiet solidarity carry their own heroism, revealing strength in surrender and compassion in forgiveness.